Story 1. The Man on My Patio. Okay, so this happened when I was around 9 years old, 25 now, and it's something I will never forget. It gives me goosebumps to this day. I live in a terraced house, 4 houses combined, and my neighbors and I each have our own little patio. There's a small road 10 meters from my yard where people do their Sunday walks and so on. Only a small fence separates my small yard and patio from that road. I live in a pretty crowded area with several of these terraced houses spread around in my neighborhood, so seeing people walking on that road is pretty normal for me. Seeing random people standing on my patio is not. When I was 9, I usually got home from school about an hour before my mom got home from work. I live maybe 50 meters away from school, so my mom figured I was mature enough to be home alone for around an hour before she got home. This one day I got home from school. I did the usual thing, which was to make sure I locked the front door and double-checked that the back door leading to the patio was also locked. I was 9. Being alone was a little scary, even though it was in the middle of the day and only for 1 hour. I then rushed to my room upstairs to play as much PlayStation as possible before my mom came home and made me do homework. While playing, I heard this noise coming from outside my window. My room was located 1 floor over the patio with a view to the road I told you about before. It was kinda like the sound of a cat, but my cat had been missing for over 3 months. Hope sparked and I thought, OMG, did he finally come back? I ran downstairs to check if it was my cat, but the sight that met me gives me goosebumps just writing this. There was a guy standing on my patio, a tall guy with black hair covering half of his eyes, making him look like a male version of the Ring women or something. I could hear him making high-pitched sounds, almost like a cat meowing. A brown liquid was running down from his mouth, and I could see him spitting out my dad's stomp cigarettes. He was actually eating from the ashtray. I was frozen, observing this, eventually snapped out of it and screamed so loud that the man must have heard it. He didn't react. He kept on eating from the ashtray. I ran upstairs to my room, locked the door, and called my mom, who then called the cops. I've never been more terrified in my life. Laying in bed under my sheets, shivering with fear as I hear these creepy high-pitched noises from the guy eating cigarette stumps from the ashtray on my patio. I kinda blacked out for a moment, because the next thing I remember is the police arriving on the road by my yard. I hear them talking to the guy saying stuff like, "What are you doing? Get over here or we will come down and arrest you," and so on. He didn't respond, but the high-pitched sounds was more frequent and louder. I decided to look through the window, feeling safe now that the cops were there. I could see 2 police officers standing by my fence, 1 man and a woman. I did not see the creepy man, however, because he was standing directly 1 story under me in my field of view. The police jumped the fence, and I remember hearing the creepy guy screaming louder than anything I've ever heard before. He charged the female police officer with full force, and he fucking knocked her out cold. The male officer then immediately tased the guy, leaving him shaking on the ground, screaming still. The policeman struggled to keep him on the ground while putting handcuffs on him, but eventually made it. After a while, he managed to wake up the female police officer, who seemed to be badly hurt. He called for backup and an ambulance, and then he sees me standing in the window above him. The expression on my face must have been something else, because he just looked at me and said, "I sure as hell hope you didn't see all that." I started to cry. By this time, neighbors started to arrive, wondering what the hell was going on. One of my neighbors, an elderly woman, made me come down, and she took care of me until my mom came back home. The police took the creepy guy with them in the car and left. Before they left, they promised to come back and talk to us about what had happened. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The male police officer came back later that night and sat down with me and my mom to talk. He explained that the guy on my patio was actually diagnosed with severe autism, He had escaped a facility where mentally challenged people lived, located around 5 kilometers from where I live. He explained that the guy had actually been living in my house 5 years ago, but he had been forced to move when his mom, his only caretaker, died. The poor guy probably thought he would find his mom in my house. He missed the routines, and he missed living there with his mom. The police had to move him from the house, that time 5 years ago, because he was extremely strong. From what I heard, he had extreme tensions in the body because of the autism, making his muscles grow stronger and stronger throughout the years. This was the reason he reacted the way he did when the police came this day. Still frightened, I told the police officer that he needed to make sure this would never happen again. He promised it wouldn't. After a few sleepless nights, my life got back to normal. The years went by and the guy didn't come back until 1 year ago. At this time, my mom and dad had moved out. I bought the house from them and I'm still living there today. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the patio when I see this random guy stopping on the road by my fence. He just stands there looking at me. I look at him and give him a nod. And then I hear the high-pitched noises. Holy shit, it's him. His hair had turned gray, but the high-pitched sounds made me realize. My heart started racing and I instantly remembered the reason why he was back. I realized that he must have managed to escape again, because I kept my cool a bit longer then. When was 9, I started to realize how sorry I felt for the guy. 16 years later, and he was back to look for his mom. I decided to carefully ask him if he wanted to come down to the patio. He instantly jumped the fence. I started to think he would knock me out like he did to that police officer. He didn't. He smiled. He looked at me and smiled. I offered him to sit down. He didn't respond. I offered him to come inside. He started laughing. We went inside. His face lit up, pure joy. He was home. It reminded him of the life he had with his mom. It almost made me tear up. All of a sudden, he sat down in my couch, turned on my TV, and switched directly to the cartoons. I observed him for a while. He was just completely focused on the cartoons. I just wanted him to enjoy the moment, so I didn't say anything to him. I realized I had to call the facility to let them know. The caretakers arrived 10 minutes later. After a lot of convincing, he got back up, crying, and they went back to the facility. I called the facility 2 days later. We made a deal. His name is Tom, and I now consider Tom my friend. Every Sunday from the day he returned, Tom and his caretakers visit me to watch cartoons. They say it's the highlight of his week. It makes my heart warm. Now, for several years, my thoughts were, let's not meet. Guy on my patio eating from the ashtray. Now my thoughts are, let's meet every Sunday to watch cartoons. My friend Tom. Story 2. My neighbor the monster. Have you ever met someone, even just a little kid, and you just knew they would grow up to be a monster? In our neighborhood, that was TJ and Eric. They were the bad kids, pushing kids off their bikes, assaulting girls, stealing stuff. It was bad enough that even at a young age, my dad looked at them and speculated, those boys will spend the majority of their adult lives in prison. Not that it was entirely their fault. When they were both very young, they were living with their mom and their stepdad. Stepdad was an abusive drunk, also a cop #ACAB. One day while stepdad was cleaning his gun and decided to shoot at a stray dog instead, he then shot his wife in the head in front of the boys. So yes, this inevitably fucked them up. But don't feel too bad, one of them testified for the defense. Side note, stepdad only served 4 years for manslaughter #ACAB. As they got older, the crimes escalated. What started as them pushing kids off their bikes escalated to theft, burglary, breaking car windows, stealing cars, etc. They were in and out of juvie and jail. One day, I was standing in my bedroom when I heard a big bang. I looked out my bedroom window and saw a car rapidly reversing out of our cul-de-sac. After the cops came, we discovered that someone had shot a gun on our street. The bullet had shattered the windshield of a minivan in our cul-de-sac. The bullet was embedded in the car seat of a little girl, a playmate of my little sister. She was not in the car seat at the time, but it was jarring for everyone in the neighborhood. And then, along came Sarah Starling. She was 15, while her boyfriend Jason was 19. Jason and TJ were good friends. Sarah was only 15, but she liked to party, and her mother not only encouraged it, but supplied the booze and weed to her and her friends, including TJ, including Jason. Jason actually moved into her mother's house, much to the chagrin of Sarah's stepfather, Jerry Rose. Teresa Rose, Sarah's mother, was the puppet master in the events that followed. Teresa approached TJ and Jason. She had a proposition. She was sick of Jerry and of his complaints. She had her eyes set on his life insurance. TJ and Jason agreed to murder her husband. In return, she would give them $10,000, Jerry's car, and a trip to Hawaii. The first attempt to kill Jerry Rose was in his garage. When he came home from work, he always entered the home through the garage. They were lying in wait for him. On this particular day, Jerry had eaten something that didn't agree with him. He parked in the driveway and ran in through the front door to get to the nearest bathroom for relief. TJ and Jason, upon realizing their mistake, freaked out and immediately left, aborted the mission. There was a third guy who was involved, and he was so spooked, he dropped out of the whole mission. A few weeks later, Jason, TJ, and Sarah were all at a friend's house. They all left together, as per the friend's testimony. The story gets hazy after this. The facts are this: they parked at Kingsgate Park, in a neighborhood not far from ours. Sarah Starling was put into a chokehold. Sarah Starling was dragged from the vehicle. Sarah Starling was stabbed through the throat with enough force that the tip of the knife broke off. She was nearly decapitated. Less than half a mile from our house, she was found the next morning by someone walking their dog. Police closed off the area with tape, and soon enough, Teresa Rose and her fateful husband Jerry arrived at the scene, begging for news. TJ arrived and started asking officers what was going on. It wasn't too long before police arrested both Jason and TJ. When they were questioned, both threw the other under the bus. One thing seemed clear from both perspectives. TJ put her in a chokehold until she lost consciousness, and then he dragged her into the woods. Whether or not he stabbed her, if it was him or Jason, only 3 people know the truth, and one of them is dead. We were all interviewed by police. We discovered that our other neighbor had seen Sarah Starling coming in and out of TJ's house. TJ and Jason both claimed that Sarah was mad at them for their failed attempt to murder her stepfather. She berated them supposedly, and that was the trigger. I call bullshit, personally. They wanted to experience the thrill of murder. Maybe they wanted practice before murdering Jerry Rose. No one really knows. We can all speculate. But my dad knew from the beginning. Those kids are bad news. ETA, a girl my sister went to school with, ended up being charged as an accomplice as she drove a getaway car for Jason when the shit hit the fan. Story 3. I inherited my grandpa's house. He left me a note about the door I need to guard in the attic. Hello everyone. I'm not sure how to explain what's happening to me, but I'll try. It started a few months ago, the day my grandpa died. I'd been to enough funerals to know the rhythm. Black clothes, hollow condolences, that heavy air of finality. It was all too familiar. That day, I learned Grandpa left me his house, but he left me something else too. A plain white envelope with just 2 words scribbled on the front. Read carefully. Inside was a note that would change my life. It read, "To my grandson, Nathan, if you're reading this, it means I've failed and that I'm no longer here to see you become the man I always hoped you would be. There's something that you need to know about our family, something that I've kept from you your whole life to protect you. You've inherited more than just a house, you've inherited a family secret. There's a door upstairs in the attic that sits in the middle of the room. You haven't seen it yet, but you will. It's a door that chooses to show itself to you, and once it does, your life will never be the same. It only appears to the men in our bloodline. I couldn't explain it to your grandmother or your mother. They thought I was crazy because they could never see it like I could. I've managed to keep the door locked away for over 60 years so that your father could raise you and give you the childhood I never could for him. Every night of my life was spent standing in front of that door and making sure it stayed closed, because if no one is watching, it opens. It can't ever open. That's why this next part is important. You need to heed these rules no matter what. Do not open the door no matter what you hear. You must be standing or sitting in front of it. You cannot be more than 10 feet away. When the voice behind the door speaks, do not respond. Do not close your eyes unless you want to open them again. Always remain at your post. You can sleep when the sun rises. There will be more, and when they appear, you need to be ready. The door is always watching and learning you. Your resolve will be tested. I won't sugarcoat things. If you fail, you will die. That can't happen, for if the door is left unguarded, the world will be in grave danger. I hope you're stronger than I ever was, Nathan. I believe in you. Good luck. Love, Grandpa Bill. The note shook me to my core. I'd always looked up to Grandpa Bill. He was my last real connection to my parents, both of whom died in a house fire when I was 17. I never got to say goodbye, and I never had closure. My grandmother passed a year later, and after that, I was left with a few distant relatives who barely remembered I existed. But Grandpa, he made me feel like I still belonged somewhere, like I hadn't been completely forgotten. Losing him felt like losing the last piece of myself that still remembered what home meant. For a while, I didn't even want to be in the house. The memories, the silence, all of it felt wrong. But I had to be strong, just like he would have wanted. I couldn't let the door win. I moved into the house immediately, and that night is when my duty began. As soon as the sun went down, I took my grandpa's note with me and went upstairs to the attic. When I reached the top of the stairs, I laid eyes upon the door for the first time. It stood in the middle of the room, and its crimson red wood was warped and shone faintly in the moonlight from a small window nearby. Scratches ran across the surface, deep gouges like something had tried to claw its way out, or in. I sat a few feet away, not daring to get closer. It just stood there, silent and still for now. But I couldn't shake the question that lingered in the back of my mind. Why was my family given such a peculiar task? The longer I stared at the door, the more it felt like staring into an answer I didn't want. The silence pressed against me, thick and waiting. Nothing happened for the first few hours, but a little after midnight I heard a knock. At first, I thought it might have been my imagination, but I heard it again. This time it was louder, heavier, and unmistakably coming from the door in front of me. I fell backwards and watched the door shake from how hard the knocking had become. Eventually, the knocking stopped, but the air was moving. It wasn't wind. It was slow, warm, and rhythmic. The door was breathing. Each damp, sour exhale brushed my face, the smell of decay curling like smoke. I backed up, but remembered not to go too far away from the door. I didn't say a word or move again until the sun came up. When the light finally touched the door, it stopped breathing. That's how it was for the first week. Life outside the attic felt paper thin, the price of a routine I was still learning to survive. My coworkers started noticing the dark circles, the zoning out during meetings, the way I'd flinch whenever someone tapped me on the shoulder. One of them joked that I looked like I was living in a haunted house. I laughed, but I didn't correct them. I burned dinner twice, forgot my neighbor's name when we crossed paths, and nearly drifted off behind the wheel at a red light. Then the sound started following me. The fridge humming downstairs began to sound like chattering teeth. My reflection lingered a little longer than it should have. Sometimes I'd catch myself whispering the rules, not to remember them, but to convince the door I still believed in them. It felt like a pact, like a ritual I couldn't escape. With every repetition, the rules grew heavier. They stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like chains. Everything real was starting to feel fake, and the only things that felt real were the voices and the door. Day after day, night after night, my life split in two, one under the sun, the other in the dark. By day, I'm just another exhausted office drone. By night, I'm the gatekeeper. Work 8 to 5, eat, sleep if I can, climb the stairs, watch the door until sunrise, and repeat. Every night blurred into the next until time itself felt like another rule I had to obey. I almost started to believe the door would never change. On the 8th night, I heard the voice behind the door speak for the first time. "Do not be afraid." It didn't sound threatening. In fact, it had a gentle tone that only made it all that more disturbing. I remember walking up to the door and standing in front of it, my pulse erratic as my body shivered slightly. A part of me wanted to open the door and put a name to the voice, but I remembered my grandpa's note. "Do not be afraid." It said it again, softer this time. I followed the third rule, listen without answering. So I stood there, shaking, listening to that voice. As the hours dragged on, I kept thinking about how my grandpa sat in the attic every night. Did he deal with the same things I'm dealing with? How did he deal with listening to the voice? Asking myself questions is how I would pass the time watching the door in the dark. It kept my mind sharp during the monotonous ritual of watching the door from sundown to sunrise. That's what it was like for about a week. Routine had almost made the horror feel ordinary, and that's when it decided to change the rules. Right before I went upstairs one night, I saw it. Another line on my grandpa's note that hadn't been there before. In frantic handwriting it said, 6. If it cries, ignore it. From then on, each night only got worse. The crying started around 1 a.m. It was the kind of crying a wounded animal made. I wanted to help, anything to make the cries stop. I almost whispered, "Are you okay?" But the rule was clear, ignore it, so I did. In response, the floorboards near the door had darkened, and the air around it shimmered like heat off asphalt. Whatever was behind that door, it wasn't just growing stronger, it was changing the world around it. I could feel it noticing me more each night, and then, as if sensing my fear, the rules changed again. A couple of weeks later, just before I made my way upstairs, I noticed some new lines had been written on the note. 7. It will show you things, do not believe them. 8. It will tell you the future, but it's all a lie. The ink looked fresh this time, like someone, or something, had written them just moments before I came upstairs. They didn't make sense to me, not until the door made me understand. It didn't scream or cry like it had before. Instead, it spoke calmly about the things that awaited me in the future. You're going to become head of your department, Nathan. You'll fall in love and have 3 children, Elise, Michael, and Jonah. The names echoed in my head like they belonged there all along. Elise will have your eyes. Jonah will want to be a pharmacist, like his grandmother. My eyes burned as tears threatened to fall. They'll all live long, happy lives, unless you keep me in here. For a second, my body actually moved. I felt my weight shift forward, like some part of me had already made the decision. I pictured my future the way it described, warm, bright, full of laughter. I wanted it. God, I wanted it so badly, but I saw through the threat masquerading as hope. I remembered my grandpa's handwriting again, warning me of the consequences, and forced myself to step back. What had once been calm and persuasive, telling me things about myself, about the future, about promises too good to be true, became violent, almost desperate. With each sob and scream, the door groaned in a sickening rhythm, barely containing whatever was battering against it. I covered my ears, begging for the noise to stop, and after a few minutes, it did. For a moment, I thought I had earned silence. But silence, I learned, was just the calm before something worse. The door's cracks began widening, twisting upward with sick crunches, the wood shifting to form the shapes of lips. Dozens of them. They were murmuring the story of a peaceful life waiting for me, if only I would open the door. Its words filled the darkness and shadows moved all around in shapes I recognized. My grandpa appeared next to me, but not the one I saw in the casket in the funeral, but the youthful one from old photographs. "Grandson," he whispered in a voice that almost sounded like his. I didn't speak. I couldn't, even though I wanted to very badly. My dad waved at me and told me how proud he was of me. My mom smiled and beckoned for me to open the door so we could be reunited as a family. I leaned in front of the door, my hand on the knob about to turn it, when I saw something blink in the keyhole. It was an eye, black and moist, sliding sideways, watching me, refusing to blink. I stumbled back, and the whispers stopped. The silence felt heavier than the noise. But even in the stillness, something was shifting. I used the flashlight on my phone to keep myself from nodding off in the early hours of the morning. Sometime around 2:30 a.m., I noticed the shadows started to pulse against the light. Every few seconds, the door's wine-dark surface would brighten from the inside out, glowing faintly, like there was something behind it pressing its face right against the wood. That image alone was enough to make me sit in the darkness the rest of the night until the sun signaled it was morning. Every night, I felt myself unravel a little more. My thoughts weren't just mine anymore. They had a different voice. The door wasn't just trying to break through. It was trying to break in, as if wanting to listen closer to what I have to say. Maybe that's why the rules kept getting more difficult each night. It knew my thoughts before I did. Before I went upstairs one time, I found 2 new rules written in the steam on the bathroom mirror. They read, 9. It will try to bargain. Do not accept. 10. Do not believe the sounds you will hear. It will do anything to make you leave your post. I thought I understood the rules until the early hours of the morning when it didn't knock but begged profusely. "Nathan, let me out. Please, just once, I can make it stop." But I wasn't hearing just the voice of the door. I was hearing screams of my parents. They were as gut-wrenching as they were familiar, and I heard them coming from downstairs, then outside, then under the floorboards. A moment later, I smelled smoke. It was faint at first, but the smell of burnt wood and melting plastic filled the air. I nearly bolted downstairs, my body ready to run and save them, but then I remembered the rule telling me not to believe the sounds I'm hearing.
The door was toying with me by digging into the deepest trauma it could find.
I clenched my fists and stared at the door, unmoving. It spoke in my mom's voice, then my dad's, then Grandpa's, sometimes weaving all 3 into one seamless, haunting sentence. Then, it spoke in my voice, in the same tremble I've heard in myself every night since I moved in. "Please, let me out. Let me out. I just want out." Frozen in place, I endured its begging for hours. My body screamed for a break, even just the relief of closing my eyes. I was losing focus fast, the kind of fatigue that makes your eyes twitch just to stay open. I had to do something. A desperate plan surfaced, a way to trick it, maybe. Hoping to cheat the rules, I angled a mirror across from me. One eye could rest while the other kept watch. For a time, it worked, until the reflection shifted. In the mirror, the door stood wide open. Something slithered out on all fours, gray-skinned and scaly, bones cracking with each movement. Its head tilted toward me, not in curiosity, but in mimicry, like it was practicing being human. I snapped my eyes to the real door. The real door was still shut tight, breathing. When I looked back, the mirror was empty, except for 5 wet fingerprints smeared downward, like someone had leaned against it from the inside. I sat there for a long time after that. The lantern burned out, but I couldn't bring myself to light another one. I kept thinking about my grandpa, standing in this same spot for 60 years, his eyes fixed on the same door, watching it breathe, whisper, and beg. Did he ever think about just walking away? I think about leaving every night. I think about the stairs behind me, about sunlight, about sleep. But then, I remember what my grandpa asked of me. My responsibility is what keeps me here, and the fear of what happens if I stop watching. When morning came, I didn't remember falling asleep. I only remembered the mirror and the way those fingerprints stained it. To drown out the noise, I fixated on one impossible question. How did Grandpa carry this burden for decades? The more I thought about it, the more I feared the real answer. Maybe he didn't. For a while, nothing really changed outside of my routine, the knocking and the voices pleading behind the door. That is until some more rules appeared on the page. 11. A single moment of inattention is all it needs. Do not falter. 12. Do not fall asleep in front of the door. At this point, I was delirious and running on fumes. I could barely stay awake at work, and I was averaging maybe 1 to 2 hours of sleep a night. There's only so much coffee and energy drinks can do for your body before it stops working as effectively. There was one instant where my eyes almost fluttered shut, and I swear I felt something brush against my cheek. The knocking started again, but it wasn't coming from the door anymore. It was coming from behind me. I spun around, nearly tripping over the lantern. Then the walls, the window, and even the ceiling above me all echoed with that knocking sound. The door would shake, the voices would scream. I'd see my loved ones begging for me to open the door, but I wouldn't. The voice behind the door would speak things to me like, "Do not be afraid. Open the door, Nathan and I will make all of this stop." I ignored it. At around 3 a.m., my phone started ringing across the floorboards. The screen said, "Grandpa." Seeing his smiling face on the screen shattered something in me because I knew he was dead. Despite the feeling in my gut telling me not to, I answered. Nothing about the rules said that I couldn't take a phone call. "Nathan," his voice crackled through the phone speaker. "You've done enough, my boy. Let me take your place. Go downstairs and rest now." My thumb hovered over the screen, my heart thudding as I remembered the other voices, the lies. I ended the call. The phone rang non-stop until sunrise. Hours later, a new rule appeared, one that nearly broke me. In slanted, sloppy letters was the worst one I had seen yet. 13. Eventually, you will fail. Fight it off for as long as you can. I read that line over and over until the ink blurred. The words didn't feel like a warning anymore. They felt like a countdown, not just because of what it said, but because of what it didn't. Maybe this is what Grandpa meant. Maybe failure isn't about opening the door. It's about how long you can last before you want to. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. The last few nights, I've been hearing slow, deliberate footsteps behind the door and the floorboards creaking in time with my own heartbeat. I keep telling myself none of it's real, that I'm still the one in control. But the longer I watch, the more I notice the door wasn't where it used to be. Last week, I marked its position on the floor with painter's tape to signify a border I wouldn't cross. I checked last night, and the tape was gone, and the door had moved. It had only moved just a few inches at first, and it made me think that maybe I was imagining it. After all, I was running on empty in terms of sleep. But night after night, it kept inching closer. It didn't drag or creak, it just shifted like it wanted to be closer to me. I measured the gap once, 10 feet, then 8, then 6. I stopped checking after that. The space between me and it was shrinking, and I swear I could feel the heat of its breath on my face. Sometimes, the floorboard sank a little beneath it, like it was pressing down with weight. Whatever was behind it was coming for me. This discovery led to another rule appearing. 14. No matter how close the door gets to you, do not touch it. I didn't plan on it. I was too tired to plan anything anymore. Just existing felt like a strategy in itself. Last night, I swear I saw something move beneath the wood, like a hand pressing out. I think my grandpa's 60 years only bought us time, and now that time is almost gone. He kept whatever this thing is locked away for decades, and now it's my turn. One day, it will become somebody else's. I don't want them to suffer like I and the men in my family before me have. My hands won't stop trembling. I haven't slept in days. I've started hallucinating. At least I hope they're hallucinations. I swear I saw the attic walls breathing last night. I wonder if the door is even real. Maybe I've lost my mind, trapped in a psych ward, mumbling while unseen eyes watch through glass. I can hear them all. My parents, Grandpa, myself. They all speak from behind the door, and the longer I listen, the more their words sound like truth. A new rule appeared, carved directly into the attic floor, just in front of where I sit. 15. When your eyes close for the last time, the door will open from the inside. I don't know if I'm protecting the world from what's behind the door, or if I'm looking after it so it can't escape before it's ready. Maybe that's what Grandpa meant when he said he failed. Not that he lost, but that he finally understood what he was guarding. And yet, he kept watching. So now I do too. There's one rule Grandpa never wrote. If the door ever stops whispering, it means it's already won. My parents call to me now. And now, another rule, 16. You will forget which side of the door you're on. If Grandpa could still see me now, I hope he knows I tried. The latch just turned.